Picture a CEO, the top of the pyramid, the one who's supposed to protect the company, inspire confidence, ensure stability. Now picture that same CEO secretly profiting while the company burns. Sounds like fiction, but it happened, more than once. In 1929, as the world plunged into the worst financial crash in history, the head of one of America's largest banks made a choice. He didn't try to save the company, he bet against it and walked away with millions while thousands lost everything. Decades later, the strategy returned, with a new face, a new name, and a system even harder to detect. Today, you'll uncover how CEOs can legally profit from their own company's collapse, how they manipulate timing, numbers, and silence, and why no one stops them. This isn't just greed, it's architecture, a quiet engineering that turns disaster into a performance bonus. Because sometimes the person steering the ship has already jumped off, and no one noticed. Until now. New York, 1929. Wall Street was pure adrenaline. Phones ringing, papers flying, fortunes made in seconds and lost just as fast. And in the eye of the storm stood one man, Albert H. Wiggin, the CEO of Chase National Bank. To the public, Wiggin was the symbol of American finance, calm, commanding, untouchable. But behind the closed doors of his mahogany-paneled office, he was making a move that would shock the nation, if only they had known. As markets soared in the Roaring '20s, Chase had expanded aggressively. Loans flowed, stocks boomed, and investors followed Wiggin blindly. But Wiggin saw the cracks forming. And instead of warning the public or protecting the institution, he placed a quiet, devastating bet. He began shorting his own company's stock. Not through his personal account, that would be too obvious. He created secret trusts registered under other names. Through those vehicles, he sold short over 40,000 shares of Chase, shares he didn't own, betting they would drop in price. And then they did. The market collapsed in October 1929, the Great Crash. Panic spread, banks failed, and Chase? Its stock plummeted. Wiggin made over $4 million on the decline in 1929 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $60 million today. While families lost homes, workers lost jobs, and ordinary investors were wiped out overnight, the man at the top of the system walked away richer than ever. And here's the twist. It was completely legal. There were no laws against executives shorting their own companies. In fact, it wasn't even considered unethical at the time, just clever. But when the truth came out during the Pecora Commission hearings in the early 1930s, the outrage was instant. Newspapers called it treason. Politicians demanded accountability. And for the first time, Americans saw what some already suspected. The system didn't collapse by accident. It was built to absorb your loss and redirect it as someone else's profit. Wiggin wasn't prosecuted. He wasn't arrested. He quietly retired, with honors. But one small thing changed. Congress passed the Wiggin provision, banning corporate insiders from shorting their own companies. A slap on the wrist, a symbolic gesture. Because while that exact move became illegal, the mindset never went away. The idea that you could lead a company and bet against it survived. It just got smarter, quieter, more refined. And as we'll see, it came back. With new names, new tools, and new billions on the table. Decades passed. Regulations evolved. Markets globalized. But one thing remained. If you knew what was coming, you could still profit in silence. The year is 2021. Torchlight Energy Resources, a small oil and gas exploration company, announces a surprising pivot. It's merging with a tech firm called Metamaterials, a Canadian company claiming to be on the verge of revolutionary breakthroughs in optics, sensors, and invisibility tech. Wall Street yawns. Reddit, however, does not. Retail traders flood in, calling it the next Tesla. The stock explodes from under $1 to over $20 in weeks. Memes, tweets, FOMO. But behind the digital noise, something quieter was happening. The CEO of Torchlight, John Bratta, begins selling shares. Not just a few, not just once. According to SEC filings, Bratta executed multiple sales in the middle of the frenzy, while public sentiment was still euphoric and before any negative press emerged. In total, insiders unloaded millions in stock just before the merger was finalized. The timing? Impeccable. The price? Near peak. The result? While retail investors piled in expecting the next big thing, Bratta and other insiders cashed out, locking in profits just before the inevitable drop. And again, it was all legal. Because of a regulation called Rule 10b-5-1, executives can pre-schedule sales of their own stock. In theory, this prevents insider trading. In practice, it creates a legal smokescreen, one that allows CEOs to dump shares during optimal windows as long as the plan was preset. The problem? These plans can be created, paused, or modified in ways the public rarely sees. And Torchlight wasn't alone. In the same year, Moderna's executives sold over $320 million in stock, much of it timed around key vaccine announcements. Critics questioned the ethics. The company cited 10b-5-1 plans. The pattern repeats, over and over. Executives learn to speak in code, delay bad news, accelerate good news, time their words not for truth, but for exit. And the public? Left with the aftermath. When Torchlight and Metamaterials finally merged, the stock collapsed. Retail investors who believed the hype were devastated. Lawsuits followed, allegations flew. But for Bratta, no charges, no scandal, no hearings, just a quiet exit. Because he didn't break the rules. He simply mastered them. And what started with Wiggin, a man shorting his own company in the open, had now evolved into something far more subtle. A game of information, loopholes, and precision timing. The names changed, the industries changed, but the core principle stayed the same. If you control the narrative, if you know what's coming before anyone else, you don't need to believe in your company. You just need to sell before the lights go out. And by the time anyone realizes what happened, the profits are already wired. The statements are already printed, and the story is already buried. Until someone starts digging again. What if the real scandal is that it isn't a scandal? What if the rules weren't broken because the rules were written that way? After decades of public outcry, new regulations, and market reforms, you'd expect one basic truth to hold. A CEO shouldn't profit from knowing their company is about to suffer. But in practice, they do, repeatedly and legally. It all starts with information, not insider secrets, but internal rhythm. Executives live inside the calendar. They know when bad numbers will be released, when lawsuits will hit, when guidance will be lowered. And the market? It reacts milliseconds after those moments. But the CEO? He reacts weeks earlier. According to a 2022 study from Harvard and the University of Washington, executives who use 10b-5-1 plans, supposedly designed to prevent insider trading, routinely earned abnormal profits by perfectly timing their stock sales. In plain terms, the data showed they were beating the market, not by chance, by design. And the SEC knew it. In fact, in 2021, SEC Chair Gary Gensler publicly called out the abuse of these plans. He warned that the system was too opaque, too manipulable. that executives could effectively write themselves permission slips to trade on inside timing without triggering alarms. But here's the twist. The rules still haven't changed, because every proposal to tighten control faces the same resistance: lobbying, legal ambiguity, institutional inertia. Meanwhile, CEOs continue to craft plans that appear automated but are anything but. And sometimes they don't even bother with the plans. In the weeks before a major layoff or product failure, you'll often see a spike in executive selling, not because they know something illegal, but because they feel something strategic. They have the meetings, they read the tone, they see the body language shift in boardrooms, and they act. The result? Executives consistently sell at prices the public won't see again. And yet, this isn't considered fraud, because the definition of insider trading is narrower than you think. It requires proving intent, direct knowledge, specific timing. The gray zone, however, the legal shadow, is where the real money flows. Because while the public waits for press releases, earnings calls, or quarterly reports, insiders operate in the prelude. The prelude is where fortunes are preserved, and no one gets caught preserving wealth. In this system, the CEO isn't a player. He's the referee, the clock operator, the one who knows when the game ends and exits the field before the whistle. And you? You're still in the stands, cheering for a team that's already left the stadium. The architecture of the system doesn't punish betrayal. It rewards foresight. And when that foresight comes from privileged access, it's not a glitch, it's the code. And that's why almost a century after Albert Wiggins shorted his own bank, CEOs are still cashing out before the fall. Different era, same game. Because the system never learned to prevent it. It just got better at hiding it. Every time the system is exposed, it promises reform. But some loopholes don't close, they evolve. One of the most persistent is Rule 10b-5-1. Originally created to protect executives from insider trading accusations. In practice, it often serves as camouflage. On paper, it sounds fair. A CEO pre-schedules trades months in advance, untouched by market timing. But here's the problem. The rule doesn't say how far in advance. And that silence became the opening. Executives began drafting these plans just days, sometimes hours before major announcements. They just happened to sell at the top, again and again. The pattern was too precise to ignore. One case finally crossed the line. Terran Pizer, former CEO of Ontrak, Inc. In 2024, he became the first executive ever convicted under a 10b-5-1 plan. Prosecutors revealed he launched 2 trading plans while holding damaging non-public information that helped him dodge over $12 million in losses that others couldn't escape. A federal jury didn't call it coincidence. They called it premeditation. And for the first time, the mask cracked. The defense didn't hold. The loophole was exposed, but not closed. The SEC stepped in. They proposed reforms, cooling off periods, restrictions on overlapping plans, new levels of disclosure. Companies pushed back. Executives defended the system, and the rule stayed, slightly modified, still wide open. Because when silence equals profit, reform doesn't move fast enough. And so the strategy lives on. Draft a plan, sell before the bad news, pause if things look promising, walk away before anyone notices. All legal, all engineered. Because when a system is designed to look fair while operating in shadows, transparency isn't a feature, it's a glitch. And the question isn't if CEOs will exploit it, it's why they're allowed to. Why the people who know the damage is coming are the first ones out the door. Until that question is answered, this isn't history, it's policy. And the game continues. He doesn't wear a mask. He doesn't hide behind offshore accounts or encrypted chats. He doesn't whisper in parking garages or slip brown envelopes across the table. He stands in front of the board, signs the checks, smiles in press photos, appears in magazines labeled visionary. And yet, behind the charm, the spreadsheets, the quarterly calls, he's placing bets. Not on startups, not on innovation, not on progress, purpose, or people, on collapse. But not your collapse, his timing. He doesn't need to guess what will happen. He doesn't need to hope for market signals or trust instinct. He already knows. He's seen the pipeline dry. He's heard the CFO's voice shift during internal briefings. He's read the letter from legal, marked privileged and confidential. He's watched the forecasts shave down, subtly, surgically, across departments. And with that quiet knowledge, he activates the plan. A 10b5-1 trade, pre-scheduled, pre-cleared, perfectly timed. Executed days before the news breaks, before the layoffs, before the market reacts, before the headlines use the word unexpected. To the market, it looks like discipline. To regulators, it looks like structure. To the rest of us, it looks like orchestration. Because in this game, the greatest traders don't beat the market. They bypass it entirely. They don't gamble. They sequence. They don't guess. They prepare. They act on public signals. They act on controlled silence. And the tools they use? All legal, all compliant, all polished with layers of language designed to confuse, not reveal. This isn't a rogue actor. It's not an outlier. This is the operating system of modern executive advantage. The evolution of insider knowledge, not hidden, but institutionalized. It's not about hacking the rules. It's about writing them. Knowing exactly how to obey while extracting maximum advantage. And when questioned, the answers fall like rehearsed lines. It was pre-planned. It followed protocol. It's disclosed in the footnotes. But no disclosure shows intent. No footnote captures the meaning behind the meeting. No line item reveals the silence before the storm. And so, the invisible gambler continues. He doesn't need to believe in the mission. He doesn't need to turn the company around. He doesn't need to deliver results to you. He just needs to time his exit. Early, quietly, legally. And while employees wait for strategy updates, while investors scan the next guidance report, he's already out. He sells. The numbers drop. The layoffs come. The damage is explained after the fact. And while everyone else tries to understand what went wrong, he reviews a different kind of outcome, one that ends with a gain, a bonus, a new plan, a new company. And when the press asks, when the lawsuits circle, when the losses mount, he'll say it was coincidence, that no one could have predicted it, that markets are volatile. But he predicted it. He built his trade on it. He had the front row seat. He had the script. Because the real danger was never the fall itself. It was the silence before the fall, and who exited during that silence. Because sometimes the system doesn't break. Sometimes it performs exactly as it was designed to, with loopholes as features, with timing as strategy, with protection embedded in plain sight. And the gambler? He doesn't bluff. He doesn't panic. He doesn't wait for a turnaround. He plays with knowledge. He exits with precision. He profits with permission. And unless the structure itself is rewritten, he'll do it again until someone asks the only question that matters. Who wrote the rules that let him win?